page shows up in the main design area of Mediator 9's interface. Across the left, we have our pages, or what we like to call our page list. This lists each individual page that's listed inside of our Mediator project. In this case, the name is page 1. In order to make this workshop a little bit easier to navigate through, I'm going to choose to rename page 1 by selecting the page, choosing rename, and since it's going to be a website, let's call our first page the home page. I choose OK. You notice that the page in the page list has now been renamed to home. Let's go ahead and create some content on our home page. The first object we're going to create is going to be a navigation bar. This is where we're going to put all the buttons for our Mediator project. I'm going to select the Insert tab, and I'm going to choose to create a rectangle. So I left-click rectangle, I go ahead and left-click on the page itself, and I hold the mouse down and drag out a box. When I release the mouse, you'll see the rectangle shows up on the interface page. It's also going to show up in the object list, and it's going to be named rectangle. Now to make things a little bit easier for us, let's go ahead and rename this rectangle to what it actually is, or in this case, a navigation bar. I do this by right-clicking on the word rectangle in the object list, choose rename, and go ahead and I'm going to name this navbar. So I'm just going to type navbar, and I choose OK. You see that my navigation bar has now been renamed in the object list. Now that I've renamed my object, let's choose to format the look and feel of it. When I select the object on the page, the Format tab is listed, and I can choose the different styles that I'd like to use to fill the object. If I select the drop-down to expand more, you can see that we have a number of different options that we can choose. Outlining the object, soft shadows, simple, and so on. Let's choose this white outline. So now what we see is our object listed, and there's a white outline on the side of the rectangle itself. It gives it a little bit more of a contrast. Now in order to make this a true navigation bar, we're going to need some buttons on it. I'm going to choose to create my buttons using the Insert tab, and I'm going to choose Buttons from my Control tab. I'm going to left-click and choose to make a square text button, and I'm going to choose this button right here by left-clicking. When I choose to do that, I left-click and drag my button out on the interface. When I release, my button is shown on the stage. Now I can choose to affect the different type of font if I'd like to. Here you can see it's set to Arial. Just like a normal text editor, I can do a drop-down to change the font if I'd like to. I can change the font size up or down. I can also choose to do bold, italicized, underline, or change that font color. In this case, I'm going to leave it as its default, and if for some reason I'm unhappy about the shape of button that I've made, I can again choose styles from the top and change the button right there on the interface. In this case, I am happy with my button, but what I'd like for it to do is to reference the home page, since that's the button that it's going to be. I do this by double left-clicking, and I'm going to type home right onto my button. You see the home button has now been listed, and it's going to go ahead and reference the home page, and it's also listed in the object list called home. Now since I'm happy with the text and the style of this button, I'm going to create 2 additional pages in the page list, but before I do that, let's duplicate this button. To duplicate a button, I simply right-click the button, I choose Edit and Duplicate, and you'll see now there is a second button listed in our object list and shown on our page. Let's move this button down a few. I'm going to use my arrow keys to move the button down, and I'm going to go ahead and move that button over as well to line it up with the button on top. Now we don't want the button to have the same text here, so again, to edit text on a button, I double left-click. Eventually we'll be creating a video page, so I'm going to write the text video on this button. Now when I change the text on the button, you'll notice that the text on the object name does not change, so let's rename that as well by right-clicking, choose rename, and I'm going to rename this object to the video button. Now I'm going to create a third button, so I'm going to right-click and edit and duplicate this button as well. You see the third button there. Again, I'm going to move it down a few, so it's lined up with the 2 buttons on top. And we don't want this to be called video, so I double left-click. I'm going to choose this as my contact button, and I'm also going to rename it in my object list to Contact. This concludes creating the navigation bar, showing the object list, and also listing the page list. Stay tuned to our next workshop where we're going to add some additional pages and create some more content on our interface.